Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time out tonight to be with us for this discussion. My name is Loretta Cohen. I work with an organization called Westchester Communities That Care. We work closely with Westchester Area School District to pull together these presentations as well as a number of other things. Primarily, our organization is concerned with improving outcomes for youth and whatever that may mean, but very, very specific to Westchester youth. So we're especially glad to have our partnership with the district and have all of you here. We have a few things coming up in just like this presentation you're going to hear tonight. We have another one coming up in February on bonding with children. And we're excited about that one on February 15th. And then we also currently have a Thrive project going on, which is we work with a group of youth. This project is happening at Henderson High School. And the reason I'm so excited to bring this up is because we work with these youth on both to learn marketing skills and about public health issues. And the topic these teens chose, completely unrelated to tonight's presentation, they didn't even know that this was on the books. They chose the topic of sleep. So what these teens have done is create a public health campaign called Prioritize the Pillow. I think that was mighty clever. 100% your kids are coming up with these amazing ideas. So I really just want everybody to keep their eyes and ears out for that. Share the ad. The more exposure this ad gets, the better these kids are going to feel about the impact they're trying to make on their community. So if you have a teen who goes to Henderson and you think they have interest in getting involved in phase 2 of this project, the campaign is almost complete, but those kids are going to need help promoting it now and pushing it out into the community and thinking of ways to do that. So if you have a kid who goes to Henderson and you think they might be interested in getting involved, please have them reach out to either me. My email address is mobilizer@wcctc.org. I'll put that in the chat as soon as I'm done here. Or they can contact Dr. Alicia Ozer at Henderson. She's one of the assistant principals there. So great. We also, if this stuff sounds exciting to you, you've never heard of us before, but you'd like to learn more, we actually have a meeting coming up tomorrow. It's at West Goshen Township Building at 11:30. We've got a light lunch that we'll have there for you. And again, you can let us know if you can attend at the same place you signed up for this, wcctc.org/meet. And again, I'll put that in the chat as well. So again, thank you all so much for being here. And now on to the reason you're here. I want to introduce Dr. Wendy Wallace. She's been a colleague for several years now, and I was so thrilled that she was able to join us tonight. She's a pediatrician at CHOP Primary Care Westchester, and she's also the director of their behavioral care or behavioral health side of things there. She has expertise in depression and anxiety in children and teens, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, disease management. I think she's one of these doctors who, is there anything she doesn't dabble in? So she's passionate about sleep. So we're very glad to have her. And I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Wallace. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Loretta, for a very nice introduction. I am very honored to be able to speak to you about sleep in the developing brain. I was thinking about this topic and felt like coming to the end. I've been in practice for 30 years at Children's Hospital. I thought this would be a great gift for the 2024 year, because anytime there's an issue, sleep is important. And so it follows a child through the continuum once they're little babies and then all the way into adulthood. So I hope that this particular talk will ingrain in you habits and understanding of why you need sleep every day and what we can do to assist our children to have good night's rest as well as ourselves. So for the key points for today's lecture, I'm just going to review for you why we need sleep from once we're little babies all the way up to many years old. There are certain helpful strategies that are important for all of us to have a good night's rest. There are some challenging ages and stages for sleep routines that occur normally, and what to do when all else fails. I have been a practicing pediatrician for 30 plus years. I have no financial disclosures. I'm not getting any particular benefit from talking about sleep from any product. I have been in practice first at Jefferson, and then I've been at Children's Hospital Philadelphia in many different roles. I was a hospitalist, which is someone who specializes in children who are sick in the hospital. And then lately I've been practicing at, you might have heard of North Hills office. We had a North Hills office, and then we merged with Westchester for the past 5 years. And then over the past 8 years, I've done 2 fellowships, one with the Reach Institute in behavioral health. And then I also created a fellowship at CHOP with the psychiatric department, wherein we have a 1-year fellowship training providers in diagnosis, management, and treatment of children with depression and anxiety and ADHD. And we're entering our 6th year of running a training program. So why is sleep so important? Sleep is where your body decides to clean out the kitchen, so to speak. It's necessary for your body to rest. Your heart rate lowers, your breathing becomes more shallow. And in that time where you are level, your body is circulating blood and fluids and cleaning out the debris in which we encountered during the day. Why it's so important to children is in those precious little years, their brain is growing. And the brain, believe it or not, grows until you're 23 and 24. And if you talk to some specialists, they will even say the brain never stops growing, and that we have ages wherein as adults we reach a time of contemplation and consideration. And we might say, I'm looking for a change. But what's really important in children is that when you rest, you allow the brain to learn. And if a child has a good night's rest, they learn better. And they retain the information they learned that day, and it becomes part of memory. Other things that are happening while you sleep: you grow in height, you gain weight. There's a hormone that is produced in the night. It's called human growth hormone, and it helps you to grow. It also, sleep helps you to build up systems that help fight infections. Now you question and you say, well, what happens if you don't get a good night's rest? Typically, most people can adapt and function with an interrupted night of sleep. But in general, when people studied sleep that was interrupted, they found that there was decreased concentration, slower responses, increase in mistakes, more clumsy, impatient, moody, and decrease in creativity. You're probably thinking, well, that's my kid all the time. But it's really important that when we look at interrupted sleep, this is where we also see children don't test or perform up to their ability. There are more car accidents. There's more fighting and impulsivity that really can affect a children's environment. Now, we also looked at chronic interrupted sleep, and this is where parents come in, because if you think about it, a new parent with a baby doesn't get a good night's rest. And there are times where a mother is up 2, 3, 4 times during the night just to feed the baby. Now, we studied this, and we also looked at residents. This is young physicians that are working in the hospital, and we found a very similar pattern of reflexes, there was decreased concentration, slower responses, more mistakes. And hence the medical field went to a condition where physicians are not required, they have a shortened period of time in which they can be caring for patients. There was a time where residents would go in at 8 a.m. and not leave until the following day at 5 or 6 o'clock. That has since been removed. But when we look at young parents, we're like, well, how does a mom who just had a baby function? And this is where we looked at it and said, if a mom can get 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, it allows her to function and care for the baby. So when I talk to young parents, I typically will say, Dad, you have a shift. When mom goes to bed, make sure she gets at least 4 hours of sleep. And then she should be able to care for the baby and function during the day. In older adults, if you get uninterrupted sleep, and this is a little bit about your uncle that snores, or you have an aunt that that doesn't sleep real well and gets shortened, gets up in the middle of the night to make apple pies. It has really been studied that people that get interrupted sleep chronically have higher rates of heart attacks, stroke, obesity, and eventually decreased mental function, such as dementia. In children, when they get chronic interrupted sleep, we see increase in behavior problems, inattentiveness, aggression, they can be very moody, and weight issues. So when I see a young child who's coming in for behavior problems, the first area that I tackle is their sleep. And it is very well shown that if you can give a child a good night's rest, their behavior will improve in the day. So I thought I would just start to talk about sleep through the ages and give you some tips on how to help the little ones to get a good night's rest. So sometimes when babies are born, they need to sleep. There's a lot going on. By 6 months of age, they triple their weight. They double their brain size. And there's dramatic increases in what they do, how they react. So much going on in those first 6 months. So when they're first born, it's not unusual for a baby to sleep a lot. They pretty much have a standard of sleep, eat, poop, and it's simple. Parents will say they sleep so much, and I'm saying, well, that's okay. As long as they look fine, we see them in the office for frequent visits, making sure they're gaining weight. But they do sleep quite a bit. And as they get older, they sleep a little less. So you will see them fall into a pattern of either a nighttime stretch of 8 to 10 hours with 2 naps during the day. And some kids will have a shorter 8-hour stretch at night, but maybe 3 naps during the day. I don't really monitor the sleep issues as much as long as they're sleeping. I'm happy with that. I've had some children who were born into a family of 6, and they did well because they caught their sleep whenever they can. It's interesting, though, that when you get a child who is participating in a lot of other activities, such as with the other children, they will tend to have cat naps during the day. And parents don't seem to think that that's a nap. But when they fall asleep and they sleep for 10 to 20 minutes, that's a good nap. So you have to be able to count all those little cat naps to understand how much sleep are they getting. Between the ages of 1 and 6, you will see a slight decrease in the amount of napping and cat napping, and you will see somewhat of a schedule of how children sleep. Typically, I see either the kid who does 12 hours straight at night and 1 nap during the day, so they do 12 hours of sleep at night, and then a 2-hour nap from noon to 2. And then sometimes you have the kid who does like an 8-hour stretch at night, but still needs the 2 naps during the day. Again, as long as the behavior is good and the child is growing and participating in life and developing well, I'm not as concerned about how much sleep as well as how they are doing. Between the ages of 6 and 12, this is your elementary school age children. It's really important they get a good night's rest. And typically they do not nap during the day. So a routine at night is extremely important because there's no opportunity for them to nap or to catch a snooze or even a cat nap during the day because their day is very full. Getting on the bus, getting to school, lunch, after school, coming home, finishing their homework. It's a busy day for an elementary student, but it is the best time to create a good sleep routine. Children developmentally between this age will do what you say. And if you're firm, those boundaries of bedtime is 8 is so so wonderful because it gives them a sense of love because you're loving them so that they do their best the next day. 13 to 18 years, these are the adolescent years. They do go down in their amounts of sleep. And we do have some kids who at this age can function on 6 or 7 hours of sleep. Ideally, we want them at 8. But I do see as long as a kid is functioning and getting to school and not having behavior problems, getting good grades, there are some children who can function with a little less. And it has to do with the fact that they're going through puberty. And puberty has the hormones, and there's a lot happening both in the joy of life as well as how they're developing to their bodies in terms of girls will get their menses and boys will get deeper voices, get hair on their face. So those times of puberty are rapid things are happening. Girls will grow very rapidly when they get their menses, and then afterwards slow down in their growth. Whereas boys, when they go through puberty, they grow over 5 years. So you have a lot going on in your adolescent going through puberty. And then between the ages of 18 and 60, at least 7 hours is recommended. I would say 8 hours is ideal. So and when you have your child and you're saying, well, I still have trouble getting them to get to sleep. There are sleep interrupters that happen for anybody. And I see this, and typically if it's something small, I will say, like, give it time, be firm, stick to your recommendations, and it should go away. So say, for instance, daylight savings time is traditionally a rough time for a lot of families. It seems like the kid still wants to wake up at the time that was old, or they don't seem to want to get up when the time changes and forward in the morning. There's also times where people will travel to other countries and there's a time change that will definitely disrupt a child's sleep cycle. Late night eating or an event during the holidays, sometimes we stay at our friend's house till 10 o'clock and the kids are running around and having a great time, but they get to bed a little late. That will affect the child the next day. The idea is to get the child back to bed at their routine, and they should be able to recover. There are times where we have something going on the next day and our minds are worried about it. A big test, a wedding, friends coming in from town, travel. Our minds are thinking about tomorrow and we don't sleep well because we're like, we want to get up and get to that airplane. That is a common interrupter for sleep. One thing about going to bed is we don't want to drink too much water before we go to bed. A couple little sips, when you brush your teeth, or if the little one says, Mommy, I'm hungry, and you give them a little bit of water, that's fine. But drinking a lot of water right before bed triggers the act of having to get up to go to the bathroom. So we don't recommend too much water before bed. Outside noises can interrupt a child's sleep and even your sleep. You hear a fire engine go by. There are some children who have been impressed, sleep through a train going by. So it doesn't always work, but there are some kids who are very sensitive to outside noises. You have to look at your children's medicines. Some medicines will interfere with sleep cycles. Antihistamines are very common to affect a child's sleep in that they can initially make you feel tired, but then it wears off and you wake up. Some children with antihistamines will get hyperactive. So dosing of medicines, make sure it's not right before bed. Maybe give it at dinner time or first thing in the morning. Stress, chronic worry. This is something we saw with COVID. There was a lot of stress in families. And so we saw this trickle down to children in interrupted sleep. And then, of course, if they're coming down with the common cold, they're starting to get a stuffy nose, sore throat, they have a fever, very commonly will interrupt their sleep patterns. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that occur at different ages. The first group that I thought I'd talk about is babies. And babies are just wonderful. There's the little gift. We like to snuggle with them, hold them tight, feed them. It's usually a time of much cuddling and much sleep. One of the things about a baby, and they did a study to look at this, was the fact that when they bond to the person who's feeding them, so that is eye contact, they feel safe. And that when their activities happen in a cycle, they know what to expect next. So there's one thing that is really helpful to make a baby feel secure and feel safe is to have a schedule. And during the day, one of the schedules that works really well is, the baby wakes up, the baby eats, plays, eats or drinks formula or breastfeeds. You play for a little bit, change a diaper, and they then fall asleep. So that cycle of eat, play, sleep. Same thing with the nighttime. The schedule should include maybe a bath or some reading of a book. I'm a big believer in encouraging our children to read and model that, as well as make it part of their nighttime routine. The interesting thing about nighttime is that sometimes these babies wake up in the middle of the night. What's important is not to turn on the bright lights, not to look at it as a time to play, to communicate to your little one, I'm here for you, we're going to feed you, we're going to put you back down for sleep. So communicating to the baby that nighttime is not a time to play, but during the day we play. Another important factor that is critical for the hormone to come out for sleep is exposure to sunlight. Sunlight gives you vitamin D, and vitamin D is very important for bone strength, as well as immunity and in a positive mood. When the sun goes away, the body sees darkness and produces a hormone called melatonin. When that hormone comes out, we get that foggy, sleepy feeling, and it tells our body it's time for sleep. So exposure to sunlight on a daily basis is critical for our bodies to absorb vitamin D. Now, we're in the middle of winter, and there's not much sunlight in our area. It is well known that states that are above the 37th parallel do not experience enough sunlight during the day to give our bodies enough vitamin D. How do we get it? Well, vitamin D is supplemented in the milk we drink, and it is in general vitamins like Flintstones vitamins, and you can also get it as a separate vitamin D supplement. So it's important for our bodies to sleep well to see sunlight. There are also some lights that you can purchase that give you the UV light that gives vitamin D. How much time would you need to be out in the sun? Takes only 30 minutes. The trick, though, is you cannot have any suntan lotion on. So it's a little bit difficult. And I'm not saying that, don't use sunblock. You should use sunblock so that you do not get the harmful rays from the sun. But to get enough vitamin D, it takes about 30 minutes of all facial sun on our faces to absorb it. So if you're out in the sunlight before the time of 10 and after 2 is plenty of time to get the vitamin D your baby needs. And another thing that's very important and has helped nationally with a condition called sudden infant death is encouraging babies to sleep on their backs. And what they found was the babies don't have neck strength to lift their heads up to prevent them from bending down and blocking off their airway. So we encourage all babies to go on their backs to sleep. A flat surface for the crib is very important. We do not want any blankets or stuffed toys or bumpers in the crib. They fall asleep on their own. There's nothing in their mouth. There's no rocking. There's no bottle holding. The idea here is in babies, again, a schedule is really important, but they imprint. So if a baby is falling asleep and they have a binky in their mouth, they imprint that they fell asleep with the binky. So if they wake up, they need that binky to go back to sleep. Hence, mom and dad run back into the room, put the binky back in, falls back to sleep. Same thing happens if they're in your arms and you're rocking them to sleep. If they fall asleep in your arms, they're gonna, when they wake up, they're going to go, where's mom, where's dad? And they're gonna startle. And it's really important early on, as much as 6 months of age, to teach a child to fall asleep right on their own. It's the greatest gift you can ever give them. No food in their mouth, no rocking. They can do it. It may take a little time for them to understand that it's okay, but they will fall asleep. And the challenge comes in that babies normally wake about 6 to 8 times during the night. So you think about it, if they fell asleep in your arms and you put them down, they're going to wake, and then you're going to be back in there rocking them back to sleep 6 to 8 times during the night. So early on, teaching the baby to fall asleep. So if you're holding the baby and they're starting to fall asleep and you notice it, they'll have a little drop, they will suckle a little bit and it slows down. You break the seal, get a good burp out of them, and lay them down on their back to fall asleep. We also encourage room temperatures to be not too hot. So an ideal temperature for a baby's room will be 68 to 72, and that's very comfortable. And actually adults prefer a cooler room to sleep. Another important factor for sleep is a dark room. And this comes up as a critical factor for eye development. So they did a study where they found that children who had night lights or some sort of light in their room, their eyes didn't develop as well. So if you want good vision, the eyes need to have a dark room. Now you might say, but my little one likes her little glowworm. Hopefully you can allow them to fall asleep with a little glowworm, but don't leave it on all night. The toddler years. This is where they learn to say no, and they think it's funny when they run back downstairs in their little PJs just to give mom another kiss. Challenging years. Again, they are testing their sense of independence. They are testing to see what you will do. They are just a joy because everything's new. And they know how to say the words to get you to do what they want to do. But mommy, I want one more drink of water. This is where you really need to be understanding but consistent. Schedules that are consistent. This phase usually lasts no more than a couple months, but can be prolonged if you're not consistent. If you're consistent, they understand, I can't get past this wall. But if you vary your responses, one night you let them stay up, another night you're reading 3 books instead of 1, they begin to see that they can test you and get their way. So it's very important that you remain consistent. Again, they really do sleep better if they've had some daytime exposure to the outside weather. So mornings at the playground, afternoon at the playground, triggers that vitamin D. They get a sense of exercise and exposure to sun. And when the evening comes, that melatonin comes out and they are ready for bed. We talked a little bit about exercise. The playgrounds, you don't have to tell them to exercise. They run around those playgrounds without even being told. They're curious. They're interested. They run when we were like, whoa, slow down. But they exercise normally just by being little and excited. Being firm with in bed at a designated time. Some children will stay up, and you may say, you can be in bed, you can read your books for a little bit. And when you check in on them later, they put themselves to bed. They will use distractions to the max. And again, as long as you allow those distractions, they know they've won. So it's important for you to prepare them for the night with all their distractions. So you might say bedtime's at 8:30. Do you need a drink? Let's have a drink of water. Let's go to the bathroom. Let's read our book. We're reading only 1 book. And then at 8:30, that's the boundary that lets them know that you love them. No lights again on in the room. Safety is very important because little ones, do transfer to an adult bed at this age. You want to make sure that they don't fall out of bed. Some of the beds are fairly close to the ground, so sometimes you can just put pillows on the ground. If they fall out of bed, you can use bed rails. You can use also pushing the bed up very close to a wall. You want to make sure that it doesn't separate, though, because they can get caught between the wall and the bed. And one issue that helps sometimes with toddlers is something called a transitional object. And a transitional object is something that there's a sense of independence, but then dependence. And you are their dependence. You make decisions for them. You keep them safe. And sometimes when they're separating from you, like going to daycare or getting in a car, they're fretting. And giving them a transitional object such as their stuffed animal or a object that they really like, or even just say, here, why don't you hold the book, gives them a transfer to an object so they feel safe, and then you can put them into their toddler seat, or you can get them to go into daycare. Typically, transitional objects help at that separation anxiety stage, where the transitional object is actually you're going with them, and it makes them feel safe. And separation anxiety happens at various ages, 9 months, 18 months, 4 to 6 years. So recognizing that this might help them with it is a great idea. Preschoolers, again, schedules, wake up times, bedtimes, consistent schedules helps a child to know exactly what's happening in their day. Healthy eating. This is where I will talk to the children about understanding their body and what they need to be healthy and grow. Children need calcium and vitamin D for bone growth. And I'll say to the kids, now, how do you get your calcium and vitamin D? And they look at me. It's a big word. But if they drink milk, eat cheese, eat yogurt, even eat ice cream, they're getting a good amount of calcium, and vitamin D is supplemented in their milk. You also want them to have iron-containing foods to build strong red blood cells. How do they get their iron? The best way to get iron is to eat like a hamburger. Now, not some people will say, well, I'm not a big hamburger eater, and maybe we're vegetarian in the family. You can get iron through dark leafy vegetables. You can get iron from cereals. Some cereals are fortified with iron. So if a child's eating oatmeal or rice cereal, they do fortify cereals with iron. And then I talk to them about fruits and vegetables. I do want them to have a nice variety of fruits and vegetables. And instead of dividing it fruits versus vegetables, I talk to them about the rainbow. And I say, do you eat a rainbow of color every day? And we talk a little bit about what is the rainbow and then what are the fruits and vegetables they eat in that category. What's really nice about that approach is it allows a child to have a choice. Have you looked at all the different colors of cauliflower they have out there? If a kid's favorite color is purple, maybe we try purple cauliflower. So it's a good way to have a variety. There's a variety of colors of apples, grapes, peppers. There's a lot of ways to get a nice variety without making it about fruits and vegetables. It's important for blood cells and your immunity. And we also need protein for strong muscles. One thing that can set a child's in this age range that you don't have naps. This is a preschooler. Sorry, naps not near bedtime. The middle of the day is best or right after lunch. Naps is interesting. There's pros and cons to naps after the age of 3. Most kids will be able to function on a 10 to 12 hour sleep cycle at night, but there's definitely some kids who still need a little bit of a nap because their behavior gets really bad toward the end of the day. Again, you don't want to have that nap at 4 o'clock because it's just going to interrupt your nighttime routine. You want to make sure that it's somewhere in the middle of the day and you have control over it. It's not too long. So some kids will go to bed, nap at 1 and they wake up at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and that's just too long. So a 2-hour nap during the day is plenty of recoup time. There are some programs and schools in the area that do not have naps for their preschoolers. Again, exercise outside. And if you do decide to give them a pillow, it needs to be very small. It should not be a large pillow. Again, we're talking about that schedule. It's very important to have schedules, to have daytime exercise, a firm bedtime. Electronics start to creep in at this age. No electronics in the room. The room should be a place where they feel safe and the body knows when I go to this room, I fall asleep. So some people will say, well, the children do their homework in their room. I question that because a lot of kids have computers now or electronics, and then some kids will have phones. So what you're doing is you're giving permission for something that stimulates the brain to be in an area where you want to sleep. So electronics, what happens is there's a blue light that comes out from the screen, enters the brain, and bounces around for a long time. It takes a good hour for blue light from the computer screen to exit your brain. So this event right now, I would definitely suggest you go to bed at least later than 8:30 tonight because the blue light from the screen is bouncing around. No lights on again, no caffeine in drinks, foods that help produce melatonin. I always make a joke that an oatmeal cookie with cherries and walnuts would be a great bedtime snack. But there's other foods like kiwi, fish, and eggs and pistachios that help produce melatonin. We all know the feeling of having some turkey and then going, oh, I feel like I need a nap. Turkey is a good source of a tryptophan, which also helps to induce sleep. It comes in pumpkin seeds as well. And then some people say, well, right before bed, I do a little drink of milk and have a little cereal, and I fall right to sleep. Believe it or not, they did a study, and they found that if you have a small bowl of cereal with milk, it will help you sleep. So it's important not to make it too close to the bedtime, maybe an hour or two, so it gives time for the food not to be sitting in your stomach. But it is okay to have a little cereal before bed. And then we end up in I think you're getting the gist of what I'm saying right now. I hope you're seeing that consistent schedules, exercise, and sunlight are very important for you to feel good at night. This is where we need to get very aware of what our kids are doing with their phones. And it's interesting. Some people will say they use their phone for an alarm. And I'm like, well, it's not a great idea, because if the phone is not silenced, they hear people talking or dinging or liking their comments through the night. And it really does. Just that little ding will interrupt your sleep. No lights on, making sure there's no lights on, or if there's a light on, it's off after a period of time. You want it, no video games, computer 1 hour before bed. Exercise during the day is ideal. You might encourage them to walk to and from school, walk the dog. Interestingly, if you do exercise in the evening, your body needs about 3 hours to recover from exercise. So I feel really bad for those guys that play hockey, because sometimes their hockey practice is at 10 o'clock at night, and they typically will come to me with a lot of sleep problems. For healthy eating, always important, no caffeine after 3 p.m. because it's in your body. It's caffeine. If you take caffeine, it's 6 to 8 hours in your body. Now you're saying, but Dr. Wallace, they're still not sleeping. And this is where it gets challenging. I can guarantee you, if you have a child who's having trouble sleeping and you said they have a schedule, they get exercise during the day, they're eating healthy, and you came to your doctor and said they're doing all these things, there might be something else going on. Sometimes we have short-term interruptions in sleep. And I would say, as a practitioner, I look to make sure that there's nothing contributing to interrupted sleep. Sinus infections can interrupt sleep very significantly. Even if they're sick, they, come in. We'll get children who aren't sleeping well and they have an ear infection. Did their schedule change? Did something change that made them want to not sleep as well? So those kids who drop a nap may have interrupted sleep because they dropped a nap too early. And then the other side, maybe they're outgrowing their nap and they don't need to nap during the day. Do they have a new bed? Do they have a new room? These things are new to them. And then when they fall asleep, they wake up and they're like, where am I? So making sure that if they transition to a new room or a new bed, it looks very similar to what it was before. Are there any family stressors going on? Arguments during the day? Mom is traveling, dad is traveling. Children pick up on these things and get worried. Where's daddy? Where's mommy? Night terrors are something that happen when a child is not getting enough sleep, and they will wake up frantic between the hours of 11 and 1, and they will cry and cry, but they won't recognize you. It's kind of scary. But what it is, and then they fall back to sleep. Now you're wide awake because you were like, what happened to my poor child? But typically this is a case where the child dropped a nap and their body is not ready for no nap during the day. So typically we'll say either go to bed earlier so they make up for that drop nap, or go back to napping. Sleepwalking will also occur in children who have not gotten a good night's rest, or they need more rest. And what happens is their body is half awake. This is something where you may encounter in the middle of the night, a little one wakes up and they walk into your room. And typically they're not really awake. It's their body saying, where's mommy or where's daddy? So they come in, and sometimes parents will say, I just walk them back into their room and they go back to sleep. You can also just say, mommy's right here. You can go back to your room. Sometimes they wake because they have to use the bathroom. So there's definitely times where sleepwalking is an interrupter for sleep. Dreams occur closer to the morning and can be imprinted by what they've seen the night before. So if a child is watching a horror movie, that particular movie can stay in their brain and they may dream early in the morning. So be careful about what your child is watching before they go to bed. It can trigger dreams. Reading is less likely to cause any bad dreams. So I'm always encouraging kids to read before bed. So what if you're like, okay, it happened a few times, shouldn't I ask? So always ask your doctor about what your child is doing, and just to make sure there isn't something else going on. I have had children have like a risky sleepwalk. Some kids, believe it or not, will not go very far. They just walk to their mom or dad's room, or they may climb into bed with a sibling. It's not bad. I have had children walk downstairs, get a bowl of cereal, and fall asleep in a closet. So sometimes you're like, that's a little risky. And I've had children leave the home. So that's where you should talk to your doctor about any risky sleepwalking business that your child is doing, just to make sure there's nothing else going on. Falling out of bed is very common. Some children are movers, they move around in bed, and particularly when they're in a new bed, they can move and then fall out of bed. So you want to make sure that the child's bed is not too high off the ground and that it's safe. So, I get excited for children when they said we got bunk beds. I'm not real crazy about them. I would say children over the age of 6 can possibly be in a bunk bed. I have seen many kids fall out of bed and injure their heads, break their arms. So I'm a big component of making sure the sleep area is very safe for them. If your child is snoring, that is something that we know interrupts sleep and chronically can contribute to many conditions. Snoring sounds like your aunt or uncle's, breathing. And then some parents may even say they snore so much that sometimes I feel like they're not breathing. They stop. And that is something to talk to your doctor about. The reason why they're snoring is between the ages of 2 and 8, the tissues that make immunity grow, and they are in areas of their mouth and around their nose. And sometimes, we're all human. Sometimes those areas grow too much or too big for the little one. And that's why sometimes we'll say, well, they're snoring, but we're going to see if they outgrow it. And so typically by the age of 8, if a child is not snoring, then they've outgrown that growth of tissue. But any child that is snoring and has stopped, you feel like they stopped breathing, I would bring that to the attention of your doctor. Some children will have trouble turning their thoughts off. And this is something that we see with some children with a condition called separation anxiety. They want you to be in bed with them. They want you to read one more story. Mommy, you lay with me. And this separation anxiety typically occurs around the preschool, entering kindergarten, but can persist into older ages. And sometimes they have too many thoughts in their head, and it keeps them awake. This can also be seen with children with anxiety. So I think it's also important, if your children are having trouble and it takes them a long time to fall asleep, to bring it up to your doctor. The amount of time a child needs to fall asleep is about 20 minutes. So if you go in to check on your child, they went to bed at 8:30 and 9:30, they're still awake. It's time to look at their environment, making sure there's no computers or anything to stimulate them awake. Look at what they're eating. Are they getting enough exercise? And bring up the fact that the child is taking a long time to fall asleep. one important thing too is if you see daytime struggles, like they're falling asleep in class, or their grades are not good, or they're getting in trouble with fights, or they're just cranky all the time, I would definitely bring that up with your doctor and discuss. Sleep is an important part of this, but it could be contributing to these daytime struggles. And that's why your pediatrician is there for you.
Dr. Wallace, can I interrupt with a question in the
Yeah,
chat?
yeah.
A question for you. Are there any suggestions for older child waking, not sleepwalking, and coming into parents' or siblings' room, or refusal to sleep in their own room?
So there's a couple different sleep support books out there. One of them is to look at the sleep cycle with a reward. So for instance, you might use different ways of getting them to stay in their bed. Like you can come into mommy's room, but not until 6. And then they put a little clock in there and they have to wait till it hits 6. And then after a period of time where they've slept in their own bed, you reward them with, something they're interested in, like, it could be an action figure, or it could be a trip to ice cream or something like that. That's a tough one. It's important. It's a combination of light sleeper with separation anxiety. And sometimes it's the kid that gets a lot of attention too. So looking at ways in which to make it a positive experience, but be firm that this is, your sister needs to sleep. When you get in there, you interrupt her sleep too. She needs her sleep. So making it an impassioned statement. There's a Ferber method that is being firm, and it's a little tough. You kind of like hold the door and you say, go to sleep. There's also a transitional one where you get them into bed and then slowly you leave the room as they fall asleep. So like you might be near the bed when they fall asleep, then you're at the door when they fall asleep, and then you're in the hallway. You might be at the other room saying, I'm right here. So there are different methods to help a kid who has struggles through the night. Thank you for that question. So take home points, as you can tell, these are things that I do all the time. If I'm on call, I'm getting calls at all time of the night. I'm telling you, it takes me a couple of days to get back from an interrupted night's sleep. And also too, sometimes I'm going to the office and it's dark, and I'm getting out and it's dark, and I'm like, this isn't good. I need to see some sunlight. So taking a walk at lunchtime, I take a walk at lunchtime. So consistent wake up times, consistent sleep times, you can vary them a few hours occasionally, and you should be able to recover. But if you find yourself, if you vary it just 30 minutes and you feel it the next day, you understand yourself. You understand what your body needs, and it's important. Sunlight's very important for 30 minutes a day. Avoid things that stimulate the brain. That includes caffeine, that includes medications. Make sure you're not taking medications right before bed that keep you awake. Exercise is important during the day. Getting a walk in first thing in the morning, taking the dog for a walk before dinner. Again, being cognizant that if you exercise, like if you go to the gym and you do, the elliptical and you're burning your energy, it takes a long time for your heart rate to come back down. And then when you go to sleep, your heart rate drifts down. And, if your resting heart rate is around 70, it drifts down to the 60s to sleep. So when you're exercising, your heart rate can be up to 180. So you can imagine it takes some time. And then give yourself a calming ritual at night. Relax. Say, this is my time for bed. Warm bath. Lavender is meant to help make you feel sleepy. You do some reading. You might have a little snack with some melatonin. But these are self-care items that are extremely important, not only for your function during the day, but your mental health during the day. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wallace. I don't know if anyone else had any other questions. Um, I was very excited to learn about the vitamin D thing because I've always known that vitamin D is good for us, and we go in the sun, we get vitamin D. But I always thought that was for bones. I didn't never realize it had anything to do with sleep. So, learn something
Another
new every day. I got
question
my
come in. What are the tips for sensory seeking children for sleep?
Good question. So sensory seeking kids either are hypersensitive to things that touch their skin, or they need something on their skin. So these are the kids that as babies like to be bundled a little longer. And so when they sleep, their bodies move a lot. And when they move a lot, it interrupts their sleep. So the child is bundled a little bit, and so their arms and legs aren't waking them up. And some children with ADHD do sleep well as those kids with sensitive with a weighted blanket. And you want to be careful. There's a lot out there in terms of the weighted blanket. You don't have to buy the latest model. Some blankets just feel heavier. You can do the tuck snug as a bug, like you just kind of like tuck them all in all around, and that pressure from the blanket being wrapped around them will give them a sense of safety. It's like a little cocoon. I had one kid who was very sensitive and required a blanket wrapped around her head like a turban. And we tried everything to wean her off of her turban. Believe it or not, she went to college with her turban. She went to college. She's doing good. We laughed about it. So there are sometimes kids that have habits before beds that, they need. And as long as they're functioning fine and they're happy children, I don't worry about it as much.
Let me read you the next question.
Sure.
How would you handle late night sports and practice that go to 8:45 for an 11-year-old? Do you think opting out and saying 8:14 and practice longer another night?
Do you want the mom answer or the pediatrician answer? So I think sports are really important. I think the hard part about sports now is that everybody has a sport and everybody needs time on the court or time. I say don't do them. I think you have to respect the fact that you're setting them up for issues during the day, and a late night practice for an 11-year-old is just not good. They're just so sensitive to their need for sleep and their performance the next day. And it's right before puberty too, that I would probably be like, that's kind of late. Now, there are definitely people out there that their children have some talent and they want to nurture it. I think if you can get them the practice and the exposure at a time that respects their bedtime, that's the best thing. But yeah, I see this all the time with these hockey players. And do you know what ends up happening? I'll be honest with you. They get a concussion and then they're out. And suddenly they're much better because they're taken out of hockey and they're sleeping better. Unfortunately, a concussion interrupted their late night practice. So I caution, because sometimes I feel like, were they not getting enough rest? So they were making mistakes out on the skate when they were out on the ice. So just they have many years to gain skills safely. So I'm a big firm believer, bedtime is bedtime.
All right, one just came in. My daughter is 11 years old, and when she went to sleepaway camp, she had night terrors every night. She has them occasionally at home, but at camp daily. Trying to decide if we should avoid sleepaway camp. She was highly stressed in the evenings and homesick at bedtime. Is stress or sleep deprivation causing the night terrors?
So I think probably she wasn't getting enough sleep initially, and she probably was experiencing sleepaway camp for the first time, and probably experienced a little bit of separation anxiety. It all depends. A child's experience 1 year can be totally different the next year, as long as they go into it healthily. So I would imagine that the chatter right before bed was a little bit later, like the routine just really was hard on her. And the night terrors were a good indication she was not getting enough sleep for her. A bunch of other 11-year-old girls could have been fine with that sleepaway camp, but for her, it was a little harder. So I think if you're thinking about it again, you might want to make sure she's getting a good night's rest, get an idea about how many hours she needs to be functioning during the day, and then talk to her about sleepaway camp and what were her feelings. Did she miss mommy and daddy? What are some things that you could do to make the experience more positive so she enjoys sleepaway camp? But that's a tough one because she's under someone else's rules when she's at sleepaway camp. I'm not sure what, I mean, I'm not, to tell the director she needs 10 hours of sleep, not 9. I don't know how that would go, but I think you can work with her individually. And she may actually say, you know what, mom, I'm not ready. I don't want to go this year, maybe next year, which is perfectly fine. Every child is a little bit different with sleepaway camp. I'd have to say my kids were not big on sleepaway camps. And there are some pediatricians who say sleepovers and sleepaway camp. No, never. Too many things can happen with a child who is not in your care, but some kids love them. So I think you have to individualize according to your child.
Couldn't find my unmute button. All right, I'm going to hand over to Loretta has a quick answer for a question in the chat.
Yeah, there's a question about cell phone use, and I just wanted to real quick touch on that because this is obviously related to sleep and what we've been talking about, but also just in general cell phone use. We need to have boundaries and parameters around those in our house. I don't know what age child we're talking about, but it's really a great idea as kids, before kids are getting a phone. Now, obviously, it sounds like this child already has a phone, but to come up with a family agreement around cell phone usage. I have a sample contract that I can send out that you can try. You can also Google them and find one that you like on your own. But the most important thing is to sit down together as a family and decide what everyone's rules are going to be. It's not just like we're the parents and we're implementing rules onto our kids, but for everyone's better health, we're all going to abide by certain rules with our phones. And your rules as parents might be different than rules as kids, but include them in that conversation, and then it's going to go a lot better. Your kids can contribute to what they think their structure should be. Cell phones are you know, have a wealth of convenience, but also a myriad of issues developed from overuse of those. So it's super important. I feel like there was like this was like a multi-part thing, so I don't really know. But is there a way to disable devices without direct confrontation? There's all sorts of things in the inner workings of the phones, and I'm not really, I can't speak well to all the different types of phones and what's out there, but it's important to remember that you are the parent as much as I feel like they need to be included on the discussion, and it needs to be, a healthy conversation around cell phone use for the whole family. We do need to know that we're the parents. And when push comes to shove, if everyone has sat down and agreed that these rules are the best for us and a child is not, there needs to be consequences. And I think it harkens back to what Wendy said about when you put them to bed and you make them go to bed at the same time every night. That's you showing you love them. It's the same thing with taking the phone away and saying, we had established rules, you broke the rules, and we all agreed these would be the consequences. So you get the agreement up front, and those first few times are hard and you get pushback, but after that pushback, they start to see that you love them and you care about them. And it gets easier.
There's a hand raise that was waiting. Summer Cavalier had a hand raise, and then 2 more questions in the chat.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't think I have chat, so I couldn't put my question in. I was just wondering if you could maybe offer some suggestions regarding the separation anxiety or the quieting of the thoughts. I have a 10-year-old. She um has no problem staying asleep, but it could take her upwards of 2 hours to fall asleep at times. And I mean, what you said resonated, but we've tried a lot of different things, and I was just wondering if you had any other suggestions.
So this goes back to the need for the child to recognize that her thoughts are interfering with her brain going to sleep because she's thinking about things. So it depends on the age of the child and the maturity. There are some sleeping apps that are based on age, and they're really adorable. They do use the suggestion of you're, putting the sheep in the barn, counting the sheep kind of thing. They are meant to direct the brain to an activity that becomes monotonous, and it's boring and it's the same thing every time, and eventually trains the brain to, the mindfulness exercise will bring them to sleep. So I would probably look, there are some apps for, and again, this is the phones again, which I'm not encouraging. There are some books with, you can read that are actually helping to turn off the brain. There is a process of, in mindfulness, if you've ever done it, it's a body scan where you think about your head and you go to your eyes and your eyes feel heavy. You kind of self-talk. Depending on the age of the child, she could try some of those things. Those have been remarkable for my ADHD kids who do have trouble winding down. And what's really great about it is they do it themselves. So empowering. There are also some kids who do well with something like music, the slowly fading lights. So I think I would encourage at least looking at the mindfulness reading exercise and see if that helps. It's a tough one. And then you can also, there are some kids that have anxiety at that age, and it's pretty profound. So making sure that there's not a level of anxiety that we need to do a little bit deeper dive with maybe a therapist.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
The last question that came in was very similar about helping someone fall back asleep. So I think your advice was very similar. One more here is about a bedtime for a 9-year-old and then 13-year-old. They said tips for navigating bedtime and enforcing lights out when there are 2 toddlers and 2 older elementary children. So it sounds like there's staggered times that they're struggling with.
Yeah, definitely tough. So the older ones, so it's kind of respecting that there needs to be a bedtime for parents too. You need downtime. So if you were to say lights, the kids go to bed at 8:00 and that the kids are in their bed getting ready and maybe they're reading. So they're not really going to bed until like 9:00, but they're doing downtime exercises in their room without stimulating light, might be a way to negotiate a variable bedtime. My hats are off to families, large families. I know that what I learned with my families that have 6 to 8 kids is that these moms are firm. They've seen the battles through every kid, and they hold firm to certain bedtimes. Giving the kid individual attention, is important too. So if you said one was at 7:30, one was at 8, one's at 8:30, one's at 9, it's a long night for you, but what a great gift, because once they get up to adolescence, they don't want anything to do with you, and then they're gone, and you miss those cuddle nights where you've read Thomas the Tank 10 times. But yeah, I think if you can try to say, this is the time we do bath, and then maybe the babies get the bath first and then they're in bed, trying to look at commonalities and consistency would be best.
Thank you very much. Loretta, do you have any final comments for tonight? She may have stepped away. There she is.
Yeah, no, just wanted to thank Dr. Wallace again and wanted to remind everybody, our coalition has a meeting tomorrow at 11:30 at the West Goshen Township Building. We'd love to have you join us to learn more about all the things that we're doing. And again, our next one of these parent speaker presentations is on February 15th. So check us out, wcctc.org. And if Jill's still on the call, maybe she'll throw that back in the chat again. I don't know, but it's been a great night. So much great information. Thank you to Chris for handling all our technology.